Wonderful. So I'm going to try my best here to have our hybrid of my friends on Zoom and people in person. I'm going to screen share with you on Zoom what I will be sharing, the physical handout in person, but I understand it might be difficult, but we're gonna try our best because I both have a source sheet for you as well as some excerpts from our high holiday Machzor.
That's the new one?
That's our new one. And we're joined now by Susan. Hello, Susan.
Hi,
Hello.
sorry I'm late.
You're fine. Again, so I have both our friends in person and our friends on Zoom. So I will try my best to translate one to the other. So and we're just gonna have sablanut, some patience, and some rahmanut, some mercy, as if things get lost. Both will be brilliant things on Zoom and brilliant things in person. They might get lost one to the other, but I will try my very best to be a gatekeeper to both worlds. So, Rosh Hashanah, it's coming. It's coming. Whether or not you're ready for it, Rosh Hashanah is ready for you, and I think that's kind of the point of the holiday. Well, there's many points to the holiday, but I'll give away my main point now, just in case you want it, then I'll bring it up at the end. Rosh Hashanah is the most complicated. It's the most complicated holiday in the entirety of the Jewish calendar. And I think that Yom Kippur, which is next time, gets this bad rap of being this depressing holiday, this complicated holiday, this sad holiday. But liturgically and historically, it could be nothing further from the truth. Yom Kippur, we're going to see next week, is all about, you know what, no matter what, God forgives me. Hooray. That's basically what the Liturgy of Yom Kippur says. God forgives me. Isn't that great? I'm going to fast. I'm going to take away different kinds of physicality from the day in order to make myself like an angel and just celebrate how great today is. Yes, we get grumpy if we don't eat, and not eating in our mind in Judaism is associated sometimes with mourning because we have Tisha B'Av, and every other time that we fast in the Jewish calendar, it's because something went wrong or we're trying to prevent something from going wrong. So that makes sense to associate not eating with sadness, but Rosh Hashanah actually is the one with all the complicated emotions. It's I guess to give almost like a marital analogy or something like that. It's something you're about to have this fight and you have all these complicated emotions going into the fight. And there's so many reasons why you're having it, but you need to have that conversation and you need to get everything out you need to be on equal footing. And that's kind of like Rosh Hashanah, where you're being judged. All the things that have happened throughout the year, all the complexities, we're going to put it out on the table and we're going to have the fight. And then we're going to make up and move on. And Yom Kippur is we've made up and we've moved on. So you have a lot of complications on Rosh Hashanah. So I know we sit around, we have our tzimmus probably in your house. I don't know. I'm just thinking there's tzimmus. Is that, yeah, I assume Laurel had tzimmus in her house, going her nice Ashkenazi husband there. Yes. So I assume there's lots of tzimmus. So of course we associate it with all the yummy foods and getting together and family, but the deeper we go in, the more complicated we'll see. So there's lots of names for Rosh Hashanah, none of which are Rosh Hashanah that we will see. So let's just, let's start from the beginning, shall we? So I have, and I'm gonna start, and how, can you hear me okay on Zoom?
Yep, fine.
Okay. I'm going to assume if you're not yelling at me, you can hear me. But that's
my internet's going in and out, so
Lee cannot hear me. Well, hopefully your internet will stay more in. And this is being recorded, so if let me know.
It's my internet.
All right. I'm trying to make this.
Okay.
Can you all see this on Zoom? Is that big enough, or should I make
Yes.
it bigger?
No, it's fine.
It's good.
Anita, you're good?
Good.
We're good. Okay, we're all good. So there's really two times that we mention this holiday, the so-called holiday of Rosh Hashanah in the Bible. So we're going to the very beginning since we're talking about the evolution. I guess I'll call on the professor to read because that's only fair. Let's read from we're reading Numbers 29, 1 through 6.
Okay. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall observe a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. You shall observe it as a day when the horn is sounded. You shall present a burnt offering of pleasing odor to the Lord. 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 7 yearling lambs without blemish. The meal offering with them, choice flour with oil mixed in.
Et cetera, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera. Okay, good. So et cetera, et cetera. Not that those things aren't important, but we have, as you said, we have in the 7th month. So where are we? In what month are we not in?
We're not in.
We are in the 7th month. So let's start there. So
Yeah.
we are using the Jewish calendar.
Okay.
So
No,
we are using the
Mhm.
Jewish calendar. Let's just start there and break it down because that I realize that might be confusing. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, is the first day of the 7th month of the Jewish calendar. I'll say that again. It's the first day of the 7th month, 7 of the Jewish calendar. The first month of the Jewish calendar technically is Nisan. That is where we have Passover. We'll get there. There are a couple of different New Years, so to speak, but that's not until we get to the Mishna. I'm taking you back to the evolution, so we're way back in the Bible. But this day when a horn is, it's a 7th month, which is we're actually in the 6th month of Elul now. Tishrei number 1 is the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Tishrei is the 7th month. That's when we celebrate our so-called Jewish New Year. It is our Jewish New Year, but it's not like January. It's like celebrating Christmas in July, right? very, very literally, very literally. So we're in our 7th month, the first day of the month. You're gonna make it a Mikra Kodesh. It's a sacred occasion, meaning you're not gonna light fires. What? But you can actually light fires to cook. That's a bad example. You're not gonna work in other ways. You're not gonna build a house. And it shall be a day when the horn is sounded. In Hebrew, it says Yom Truah, like Truah, Yom Truah Yeh Lechem. It will be a day when the horn, or when this shaky sounding horn is sounded. And that's all the book of Numbers has to say about our Jewish New Year, other than the litany of things you're going to sacrifice. Any thoughts there, other than utter confusion of what's happening here? Or even starting with utter confusion of what's happening here. Any thoughts, questions? Yes. They mentioned Shabbat. So Passover is mentioned all the time. Yitziat Mitzrayim, exiting Egypt, is mentioned all the time. Celebrating, thinking about it, recalling it, being thankful for it, threatening that we should do better because it happened for us. That happens all the time, in and out. So in the 10 Commandments, we're reminded of what God did for us when we exited Egypt.
Right, it's not in the Ten Commandments, but I'm thinking I recall that there was one of the Torah readings where there's also the Ten Commandments, and also maybe not spelled out, but also they talk about the New Year, it's like a summary.
Right, so we're gonna see, you don't see it during the 10 Commandments. You will see summaries of in Numbers and Leviticus, you're going to be told specifically to observe these holidays. And in other places, you're going to be told to keep the holidays of God. You're going to be told to keep Shabbat. You're going to be told over and over again until you're sick of it about what God did in Egypt. But we're really not told that much about the New Year, about Rosh Hashanah.
But there is one interesting thing. I'm not
Just
even-
one. Okay.
Yeah, well, sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way.
No, you can say it however you want to say it. Can you hear?
It's the part, I'm gonna pull this out.
That's
a
fine.
little.
I'll back up.
Yeah, the part about sin
Mhm.
and a goat for a sin offering to make the expiation in your behalf. I mean, that seems to me one of the themes of the season, Rosh Hashanah into Yom Kippur.
Mhm.
So, and I don't know if that's like the, what is the term? Scapegoat?
That's
I-
Yom
I'm-
Kippur. Mhm.
Yeah. Is that kind of an allusion to that?
Sacrifices so the question was, if you look a little bit further down, it says, and there shall be one goat for a sin offering. That's common. It's so sacrifices, I didn't mean to skip over them because they're not important, but they're actually so interesting that they warrant their own series, not so much that they're boring and meant to be skipped over. I think my skipping over them was trying to focus on horn is sounded, but it's certainly reasonable because I left it in here and interesting what's happening with the sacrifices. A lot's happening with the sacrifices. We don't really have prayer. There's not really prayer in the Bible as a set liturgical way of connecting to God. You have the priests, the Kohanim in the temple, who are sacrificing literally all day, every day, or letting things burn off at night, or cleaning up the altar so they can start over. It's 24/7. They don't take off for Shabbat. They sacrifice on Shabbat itself, because we have sacrifices on Shabbat. The Musaf sacrifice, the Shacharit sacrifice, the Mincha sacrifice, all of these prayers, they were sacrifices at some point by the priests in the temple. But when you're giving presents, you want to make sure that the person receiving it is most likely to get it. And so if the person receiving it is already kind of ticked off at you, they're most likely to take it and throw it in the trash, right? Your ex-boyfriend shows up with flowers, they're going in the garbage. I don't know, but again, bad examples. But so when you give sacrifices, especially on days like this, you want to make sure you butter up God with these just in case sin offerings. So just in case there's anything that we might have done that we're not even aware of, you want to clean the palate, so to speak. You want to make things right so that God's more likely to receive all these other wonderful sacrifices for the day. Yom Kippur gets very interesting with the scapegoat, but we'll get there. We'll get there. There's a whole separate ceremony involving not killing one, but sending one out into the wilderness. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it's very fascinating. But yeah, so that's cleaning the palate, so to speak. But
I have a question.
let's go to Joelle first, and then
So
Yeah.
what's significant about the 7th month?
that's the month that we're going to be in on day one of Rosh Hashanah.
No, but why was that picked? Why was that selected? Is there a reason?
That was what God chose. Now, seven is a very significant number in Judaism, for sure. On the 7th day, God rested. The 7th month, God's holy month. The 7th year, we stop. We let the land rest. 7 by 7, the 49th year into the 50th year, we release all debts. It's a number of rest. Historically or religiously or what have you. So that I can imagine that's behind why this holiday takes place in the 7th month, but we don't get a why. There's no addendum to this. It just says in the 7th month on the first day, you're going to have this sacred occasion. But if I had to guess what was on God's mind, which I don't like to try to do, but I'm going to try to do, I think it has to do with the magical, mystical properties of 7 being about rest. If you will accept such an answer.
Yeah.
Okay. I always think someone's trying to, ooh, Stephanie. No. Oh, Michelle says it's because I said so. You know, and a lot of things in the Bible, and I'm not trying to be tongue in cheek, but come down a lot to I said so, and it's the role of the rabbis and us in our day to figure out what meaning do we make for ourselves as well. All right, let's get to Leviticus. Do I have a reader for the? All right, so we're reading. So you might not be able to hear Michelle, but she's going to read this section right here.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus: in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe complete rest, a sacred occasion commemorated with loud blasts. You shall not work at your occupation. You shall bring an offering by fire to the Lord."
The end. The end. And that really is the end. That's all it says. And then it moves on, verse 26, and talks about Yom Kippur. So this is truly the end.
Is this the only day that the horn was sounded? I thought they sounded the horn to indicate the beginning and the end of the class. And was there any other time?
Michelle asked a question about the horn. Before we even get into what did we just read, I'll answer the question about when is a horn sounded. The shofar, you're right, is sounded for many things. Off the top of my head, it's sounded for assembling and deassembling the tents of meeting as they would travel, the Jews would travel around the desert. So it was a horn that was sounded in war. Hey, the enemy's coming, let's get together. It's a horn that sounded to say that the 7th year is happening. We're going to start our Shemitah year. The land is going to lay fallow. The horn was sounded to say our 50th year, our Jubilee year has sounded. It's time to release your debts and your slaves and things like that. And the horn was sounded on this time. It's some kind of horn is sounded on the 7th month, on the 1st day. There's some kind of commemoration with loud blasts. So it was used to move troops. It was used to move workers and used to rally people to let them know that something was happening, such as a sacred occasion, a holiday. Yeah. To my knowledge, it was not used for Shabbat itself. I'm always happy to be wrong. Always. I'm not trying. I'm always happy to be wrong. But to my knowledge, but I'm always happy to be corrected.
Was it used for Rosh Kodesh or Kodesh?
Rosh Chodesh, no. That was Rosh Chodesh is the new month. Fire. Fire was used for Rosh Chodesh. Tiki torches on the tops of hills. That, oh, I see the new moon, let me light my tiki torch, and the guy on the next hill lit his tiki torch, and we're going to light them all over. Fire, our friend fire, because you want for the Rosh Chodesh, knowing when the first of the month is important, because you want to know when the holidays are. The holidays on the 14th day, you want to know when the day 1 is. So a faster way of doing that was fire. You can see light from farther away, more so than you can hear a horn that's going to kind of fizzle out. So you wanted to pass the message, you used fire because you can see fire from very far away. If you lived in a place with hills where there's no street lights, if you go to more remote places, you could probably see a candle from very far away if it was a flat field or on a tall hill. So let's talk about the name of our holiday. So just to we have a sacred occasion. Numbers, we have a sacred occasion, a day when the horn is sounded. In Leviticus, we have a sacred occasion commemorated with loud blasts. So in Hebrew, you have Yom Truah versus Zichron Truah. So a day of quaking or a day of shaking or a day of a horn being sounded versus a commemoration of something being commemorated. Zichron is like a Yom HaZikaron, is a day that you remember, Memorial Day. Don't have to necessarily have any answers, but wanted to point out that those are different names. They're different days. One is a day when the horn is sounded, and one is a commemorative horn sounding. Oh, any takers there? You don't have to. You could just be lost in the confusion. My hope is that when you today, you are so utterly confused that when you come back for Yom Kippur, you will say, I believe you when you told me that Rosh Hashanah was complicated and fraught with emotion, and Yom Kippur is simple and beautiful and a day of celebration. This is my brainwashing you now. I want everyone on my team to believe me when I say Yom Kippur is simple and joyous. Rosh Hashanah is really, really annoyingly complicated. Okay. So those are two names for this holiday, and that's what we have. That's the Bible. The end. Moving on. So we have Mishna, Rosh Hashanah. And so the question was, what's up with this Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah means head of the year, new year. What is up with our holiday, our Jewish New Year happening in month 7? And the answer is Daily Double. For those following the drama of Jeopardy. For those following the drama of Jeopardy. So we have Mishnah, Rosh Hashanah. So this is hundreds of years later. The Mishnah. So you have the Bible, and then the rabbis commented on the Bible, started asking questions, tried to figure out where laws. Okay, the Bible is beautiful, and it's a holy text, but we want to know what to do. The Bible will tell you we have this thing called Yom Trua, but it doesn't tell you what to do with it. It says, observe my Shabbat day, keep it holy, but it doesn't tell you when to set your crock pot. It tells you nothing about the law of Shabbat. It tells you nothing about the laws of Yom Kippur, except that there's these sacrifices, or tells you nothing about the laws of Rosh Hashanah, except that there's some sacrifices, right? So that's what the Mishnah is trying to do. It's trying to make it a little bit simpler. And then the Gemara comes around afterwards and makes it more complicated. But the Mishnah's goal was to try to make it a little bit more simple, to actually let you know, these are some collections that some rabbis think that you would do to actually do Jewish, right? So,
Rabbi?
yes, ma'am. Yes, Stephanie.
Okay, so if it lists A and B, this is what it is, this is what you do, this much direction, is without having read what you're getting ready to do, is the Mishnah showing, I mean, could it have been different in different communities? Like the additional traditions we add to it? Is that what's happening?
In the Mishnah, no. What the Mishnah does is it tries to say 99% of rabbis think this, 1% of rabbis think this. So we're going to have a law that says, I'm going to make something up that's stupid sounding, because that's apparently my theme for the day. Okay, so I'm going to make up a Mishnah. You must put on blue pants. Michelle Bannon says you should put on a blue skirt. So what that means is that most rabbis in the world think you should put on blue pants. However, there was this one person, and she was really loud, really obnoxious in the Beit Midrash, and she thought you should wear a blue skirt. So they'll mention her by name. The Mishnah it won't mention you by name if it thinks that the majority of the world agrees with you, and it will mention you by name if you're kind of like the outlier. That's how the Mishnah works. The Gemara will break it up and say, actually, there was 15,000 opinions about what kind of pants you should wear, and should they be from Old Navy or should they be whatever. Okay. But the Mishnah tries to solidify it, tries to make it simpler of, we did a survey says most people think this, and this one guy thought this. So if it has a name, then that's the dissenting opinion. But you were asking about communities and having different kinds of ways of observing holidays. The Mishnah doesn't deal with that. The The mission doesn't deal with in Africa, they do this, and in France, they do this, and in Italy, they do this. It's assuming that they're either in Babylonia or they're in Jerusalem. It's not really talking to the many diasporic communities and their diversity of holiday celebrations, if that was your question. I think, okay, good. Let's talk about the Mishnah, the 4 days of the year that are our new year. Anybody want to read? I'm looking at Elaine, or else Elaine's gonna read Mishnah Rosh Hashanah 1. And I might cut you off at some point because it's, or have you skip, but let's go.
They have 4 days in the year that serve as the new year, each for a different purpose. When the first of
Nisan.
Nisan, thank you. That was the part. The first of Nisan is the new year for kings. It is from this day that the years the king's rule are counted.
Sorry, I'm
And
trying to.
the first of Nisan is also the new year for the order of the festival, as it determines which is considered the first festival of the year and which the last.
So let's stop there for a second. So if you have Nisan, that's when Passover is. So that's if I'm the king, and now if I start ruling in Nisan, and then you have to start ruling around right before Passover, and then a year went by, and now it's Passover again. It's year 2 of my rule. That's just how they count it. It's just it's easy for them to not keep documents of, well, this person started in this month and this person started in this month. It's easier for them just to know that when we get to Nisan, we're going to just, it's going to be a year as opposed to any other month. And that's what it means. It's the festival of the year, which is the last. It means it's the first. That's a longhand for this is really month 1. This is really month 1. So Nisan, when new kings come around, and when you count the years of their reign, and it's month 1 to knowing when all the rest of the holidays for the rest of the year follow. All right. What's our second new year?
On the first day of Elul
Mm-hmm.
is the new year for animal feast.
Tithes.
Tithes, thank you. All the animals born prior to that day belong to the previous tithe year and are tithed as a single unit. Whereas those born after that day belong to the next tithe year.
Et cetera, et cetera. Elul, which is the month we're in now, the month before Tishrei, instead of my dog's birthday, I know this because I know when he was born in his adoption papers is November 16th. The mission doesn't care that my dog was born November 16th. It's easier for them, for every animal, to have the same exact birthday so they know how old all their sheep are and they don't have to keep track. Remember, they're herders. They don't want to remember that sheep was born in May and that sheep was born in July. That's ridiculous. So they know that Elul is when all of these sheep are now 1 year old, and next year on Elul, all of these sheep are now 2 years old. It's just easier for them to keep track of their herds that way. So Elul is the new year for animals. All animals have the same birthday in this fiction that they created for themselves, regardless of when they're born. It's just easier for them to keep track. If the animal was born before Elul and Elul happens, it's now 1 year old. Even if it's 2 years old, 2 weeks, congratulations. I mean, that might sound as confusing as.
Well, how would they even keep track of that? Papers, pencils, and computers. Or maybe they didn't. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, they had ways of keeping track, but it was easier for them to know my flock was born at some point, and now they're all going to be one. It's just easier for the shepherd that way.
And
So
the fact that they include the tithe year is because sometimes they're ordered to newborn
Right.
animal and other times.
yeah. So the question was, what's up with the animal tithe? And because, right, sometimes God asked for firstborn animals for Shavuot. I want the first of your flocks. So you're not going to give me your Elul 2s on Shavuot. I don't want your Elul 2s. I want your Elul 1 sheep. I want the first of your flock for Shavuot. So it's important for them to know how old animals are. And let's just skip to on the 1st of Tishrei. Do you see that? The lines down, it's in bold.
Tishrei
Mhm.
is a new year for counting years.
Right.
As will be explained in the
Gemara.
Gemara. For calculating radical years and the Jubilee years.
All right, let's stop there. So Tishrei, that's where we're about to enter. That's Rosh Hashanah, our Rosh Hashanah. That's our new year for years. So yes, we're in month 7, but the year changes. So we're in 5781, month 6. Next month, we're going to be month 7, but we're in 5782. Yes, I know that's confusing, and that's the way it is. That's the way it is. Where our year starts over in our 7th month of the calendar. For reasons you have to bring up with God when your time comes as to why God do us like this. But it's important to count years. Why? Because I was saying before, we have this thing called our sabbatical year, our Shemitah year. We're actually starting one this year. This year in Israel, it's we're on the 7-year cycle, year 7, where land within the biblical state of Israel, the land that would have been considered the borders of Israel in the Bible, which is different than the political country of Israel. For instance, Eilat, the lovely beach resort town. You can grow whatever the heck you want there. It's not considered the biblical boundaries. So there are ways that religious farmers get out of this Shemitah year, this, so to speak. They'll plant let's plant in Eilat or something like that. So every 7 years you lay the land lies fallow, and it just, whatever was there just grows, and it's just, anyone can eat it. There's lots of laws around it, of course. It's more complicated than that, but when our Rosh Hashanah starts this year, it's starting our 7th year, our sabbatical year in Israel. So that's just a fun fact for those. I was in Israel twice during the Shemitah year, and it's never fun when you're a religious Jew and you are trying to avoid certain kinds of fruits and things like that. When I used to be ultra Orthodox, and I made my life difficult by saying I would only eat these kind of plants, and it would just got annoying. And you can't throw them out. If you're an ultra Orthodox Jew, you have to just let them decompose. So then it was all about.
So the 7 years, don't you think they also did that because it's great for farming?
Absolutely. The question was, is it good for farming? Yeah, it was a great way to. There's ways of doing cyclical crops that don't involve letting all the land lie fallow, but certainly it's an excellent way to let it all restart. That's how they did it.
Is it hard to find fresh fruit then?
It was hard to find fresh fruit. No, it just grew. The pomegranates grow, the grapes grow. The difference is you don't own it. So the difference is I don't own a farm, you own a farm, but on the 7th year, your farm is my farm. So I see that your land is just growing grapes. So I go over and go, now these are my grapes. And you go, cool, those are your grapes because God said so.
Is that a religious truth though, or?
They're talking about in the Bible.
Okay.
In the Bible. Now, and how that works now, now how the political state of Israel works, you're still purchasing food. Although if you're on something like a religious kibbutz, it would probably work like that. Yeah.
The majority of Israelis are secular.
Absolutely. Yeah, the majority of Israel is secular. It's Shemitah year works a lot differently now. They still have there are religious observance of it, of course, especially the more
Rabbinate has very firm grasp.
right. The rabbinate has a special kosher symbol now for it. So when you go to the shuk if you were going to the shuk in Jerusalem in November, they're going to have special symbols that will let you know, was this grown according to this law or that law of the sabbatical year. And so there are some religious Jews that would avoid fruit unless they came with a special kind of certification on the sabbatical year. I know that it's kosher for them to eat it because of the many laws and intricacies of the sabbatical year. But I feel like the average Joe in Israel would probably go about their day. It's just a fun fact for them, I guess.
Does this also cover not planting trees during this time period?
We're
Because
gonna,
I recently saw something online where, I don't know whether it was a money-making thing or what, but, you know, sponsor a planting of tree in Israel because very shortly you won't be able to plant trees for a year.
yes. Yeah, you're not supposed to work the land. So no planting trees. That's working the land. You're supposed to let it just lay fallow. But there's also a new year for the trees that some of us might be aware of. So Elaine, why don't you skip to where it says on the 1st of Shabbat is the new year for the tree.
On the first of Shabbat and the new year for the tree, the fruit of a tree that was formed prior to that date, once type year, will
Mhm.
not be typed together with fruit that was formed after that date.
Blah, 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 blibbity, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so then you have the 4th new year is a new year for the trees. You know, we'll do these cutesy Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, Seders, where we talk about this is the birth, the new year for the trees, and it comes from the Mishna. It's important to know how old a tree is, just like it's important to know how old an animal is, because you want to know, you know, a young animal needs to be sacrificed or a mature animal needs to be sacrificed. And a tree, you can't eat the fruit of a tree if it's less than 3 years old. So says the laws of the rabbis. So you need to know how old a tree is so you know whether or not you can eat its fruit. Yep. Yeah.
Why is that though? Why is that? I mean, some of this I just don't understand. Why couldn't they eat the fruit
Well,
the first 3 years?
I wish Emily was here because she's actually a farmer, but there might be people here who have planted a tree and it probably doesn't even grow fruit anyway, the first couple years.
True. I have
That's what I
a
think,
peach
too.
tree,
Mhm.
finally, 3rd year.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is biologically or whatever the right word is. That's what trees do. That it takes them a couple of years to get mature enough. And it also teaches you, it's related to the maturity or the weaning of a child as well. So according to the rabbis, a child is weaned at year 3 and then they become their own person. So likewise, there's a comparison to there's many times that trees and human beings are compared in the Bible and in Jewish tradition as having to do with their maturity and personalities as well, that we talked about a couple weeks ago, that when you are entering a city in war to overtake it, you're not supposed to destroy the fruit trees because a human being is the tree of the field. And I gave a whole sermon about the human being is the tree of the field. So there's many connections between the human and the fruit, and a human being is weaned at 3, so is a tree. You can always ask on top of that, Lee, why? And that's what you're going to have to take up with God again when you that you can get together your questions. I can answer why always to a certain extent, and then at that point I think that's where your personal meaning and intention comes in. Why is it important to compare the human to the tree? Why is it important to wait
Yeah.
for maturity before you start taking it? It's a lesson in patience. It's a lesson in doing something for the next generation, not just for immediate gratification. There's so many takeaway lessons from the tree. And so why don't we, Darren, how are your reading skills?
Went to public education.
So we're gonna, do you see where it says number, it's still in this long paragraph, it has a number 2. It
At
says
4
at 4
times.
times of the
Four-
year.
At 4 times of the year, the world is judged.
Mhm.
On Passover, judgment is passed concerning grain. On Shavuot, concerning fruits that grow on tree. On Rosh Hashanah, all creatures pass before him like sheep. As it is stated, he who fashions their hearts alike considers all their deeds. And on the festival of Sukkot, they are judged concerning water, rainfall, and the coming.
Right. So we're still in the Mishnah. So we've been reading here Mishnah the rabbis, this is the very beginning of the Mishnah on the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. So first it said there's 4 new years, one of which is Tishrei. It's the new year of years, that on Rosh Hashanah day 1, it's a new year count. And then it goes on to say also on Rosh Hashanah, it's a day of judgment, the day where all creatures pass before God like sheep. And then there's this line from Psalms, God who fashions their hearts alike, who considers all their deeds. So we're kind of getting this out of nowhere. We have a lot of things happening with Rosh Hashanah so far. We know that it's this Yom Trua, this day of sounding of Shofar. We also know it's a Yom Zikaron, a day of remembrance of, or somehow remembrance has something to do with the Shofar. We know that it's a time when the year starts over. We know that it's a time of judgment. Okay. And I know that's a lot already. Any questions here?
Well, just the phrasing of the idea of tithing.
Mhm.
These vegetables are for tithing. I used to consider that word tithe or tithing as synonymous with taxation. Is it? Or it's not in this context? It's like you have to give up part of your crop.
The short of the long is taxing doesn't have to always be money. Taxing, so the
That's
question
true.
was just on the word tithing and just on one foot. Again, that's a whole nother series about taxing doesn't have to be money. It can be 10% of what you got. It can be your money. It can be, and sometimes during the year, God asks for tithes of different things, of animals, of fruits. But even when God asks for animals or first fruits, you might live very, very far away and you have to bring it up on foot for the holidays. So your fig is not going to make it. So what you do is you bring the monetary equivalent of the fig. So there's money and fruit and vegetables and animals are all interchangeable in this word tithe, depending on what you have, how far you're bringing it. All that matters is that God / the priests and Levites get something. And sometimes for you, that's selling your cow, bringing up the cash, buying a new cow in Jerusalem and sacrificing the cow. Sometimes
Or
that,
making jam from the figs. Just kidding.
I don't know, or making jam from the pigs. They might like that. I don't know. They might get bored of eating the same thing.
Right.
But the short answer is a tithe is of what you got, how far away you are, and how easy it is to transport it to the temple.
Thank you.
All right, so we're on the bottom of page 2, rabbis named holiday in our liturgy. So when I mean liturgy, I mean this book here, our Machzor. So we have when we talk about Rosh Hashanah in our Machzor, when we're praying about it, there's a couple of different names that we have. So now we're going to go on a little bit of on a goose chase of these different kinds of names in our prayers. But I'll just read them quickly. So we have Yom HaZikaron, no direct object. It doesn't say Yom, so Yom HaZikaron, God remember, is a day of God remembering us, whatever that means. You have Yom Trua, this day of shaking or quaking. You have Yom Din, day of judgment. And Yom Harat Olam, the day of the creation of the world. No reference to the new year. It never talks about the new year in our traditional core liturgy. What I mean by that is the prayers that you would have normally on a Shabbat that are kind of transformed to then have special high holiday themes. There are certainly times in our high holiday liturgy in general, more new prayers, relatively speaking, that will use the word Rosh Hashanah, like on Unatana Tokef, Rosh Hashanah Yikatevu, like on, so obviously it says on Rosh Hashanah, it is written, it says it directly, but in relation to our prayers, our anonymous prayers written by the rabbis of old versus that one, which is a couple hundred years old, it's new to them, not to us. But we have no reference of Rosh Hashanah as a word. You have Yom Zikaron, Yom Trua, Yom Din, and Yom Harat Olam. So let's go on a goose chase for them. So I have your book. Let's turn to page 15, and I'm gonna get it out for you as well. All right, hopefully that's wrong. All right, so this is a prayer called Kedushat Hayom. It's a prayer that's in our, and I'm going to say words, I'll try to translate them as best as I can into English. If you're not familiar with the regular Shabbat morning prayer service, that's also okay. There's no, you don't have to be experts in all these kinds of things, but I'll try my best to explain them on one foot, although there's much to be said, obviously, about what these things are and what their purpose is. But in our what's called our Amidah, our silent devotion prayer, our standing prayer, which is the heart of any service, we have a prayer called Kedushat Hayom, Kedushat, the sanctification Hayom of the day. It's where you say, thank you, God, for giving us whatever day this is, Shabbat, the holidays. So this is our Kedushat Hayom, our sanctification of the day of Rosh Hashanah. And so it's our second paragraph. And it says, our God and God of our ancestors. I'll make it bigger. I'm going to go to the English only for now on you on Zoom, but then I do understand like that you can, some of you might have the Hebrew, but here's the Hebrew here. Our God and God of our ancestors, make us holy through your mitzvot, etc., etc. At the end, it goes, Baruch atah Adonai, ruler of all earth, who makes, if it's Shabbat, you say Shabbat, Israel, and the day of remembrance holy. So it calls it Yom HaZikaron. So on the day where we're sanctifying the day of Rosh Hashanah, the rabbis named this day the day of remembrance. That's my phone. Nothing important. So that's how the rabbis named it on. And this day it's an important prayer. Again, this is the prayer in the Amidah where you're declaring this day holy. You're saying this day is holy, and what day is this? Is the day of remembrance. And that's what they're choosing to call it there. Again, Yom HaZikaron, not Yom HaZikaron, Yom Zikaron Trua. It's just called the day of remembrance. There is no direct object. It's the day of remembering. And that's why my suggestion here is asking God to remember. This prayer is all saying, it's starting off our God and God of our ancestors. I think it's saying, God, remember us. Here we are. We're on this day. The Mishna says, you're bringing us before you like sheep. You're counting our deeds. And we're asking you to remember us, maybe with a hidden parentheses for the good, as you're bringing us one by one and counting us like sheep, remembering our deeds. Have this be a day of remembrance, maybe parentheses for good. Any other thoughts of the meaning of this here?
They have remembrance like God remembers us, or vice versa.
Or is it vice versa? Is it God remembers us or vice versa? What's the vice versa, Michelle? You tell us. You tell us. You bring it home.
For everything God has done for us.
Remembering everything God has done for us. It could be. It could be asking us to remember God.
Is it asking us to remember our ancestors, the human community? Also, I mean, in addition.
Yeah. We have no direct object. We have no direct object here. So I think it certainly is up for interpretation. I always, and what I do personally does not matter to what you do personally. I always liked it personally as the day that God remembers us, because the rest of the liturgy of this book on Rosh Hashanah is we are just reminding God over and over again about our ancestors. We're crowning God King. We are blasting the shofar. We are rending our hearts. And I like to think that while doing this, it's a little bit of a wink to God to say, now throw us a bone too. But that's my personal theology, which should be, and I encourage it to be different from your personal theology. I quite like the idea of having it invoke the ancestors. Just because you do it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it again. Right?
I mean, you do it with the Amida.
We do it
all
with
the
the,
time.
yeah, this is, and this is the Amidah. You do it
Yeah.
all the time, asking God to remember the ancestors. Anyone on Zoom want to tell us why you think it's important for us to call this a day of remembrance? No direct object. Beautiful. That's when I give you all a chance. I don't want to ignore you on Zoom. So that's Yom HaZikaron. Let's go to page 31. This is Kiddush. Kiddush. This is where we, which is another way of sanctifying the day. Kiddush, when we have our grape juice, this is our prayer. We say at home around our table with all of our loved ones and our tzimis. Laurel gave me an eye roll. No, with all our tzimis hanging out. So here is, where is it? Where is it? You kind of have a bunch of it. You have a day. So in the bottom paragraph on page 31 on the right side, Baruch atah Adonai, our God, ruler of time and space, who's chosen and distinguished us by sanctifying our lives with commandment, with love. You bestowed upon us, Adonai, our God, the day of remembrance, a day for the sound of shofar. So you got them both. You have, where is it in Hebrew? And if I can find it now, where is it? Where's Yom? Is Yom HaZikaron? Oh, it's on the top. No, where'd it go? Yom Teruah. Goodness gracious. I don't think it says it in the Hebrew. Oh, no, here it is. Yom HaZikaron. Here it is. Yom HaZikaron, Yom Teruah. So it does say in the middle of the paragraph at the top. So it has both the day of remembrance, a day for recalling the sound of the shofar. So it is, but those are separate. Yom HaZikaron Hazeh, Yom Teruah. Two separate times, two separate days. Shofar sound and the remembrance.
So the English says, and it continues a day for Holy Assembly and for recalling the Exodus.
Yes.
So is that in the
Yes, it's in the Hebrew. Michelle said, and it goes on the day of recalling the Exodus. Yeah, every single holiday on the planet in the world of Judaism is a Yom whatever Hazeh Mikra Kodesh Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. Doesn't matter. It's the Shabbat, remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. Yom Passover, Sukkot, Shavuot. Every day, every holiday, we have we remember it's for its special reason. In this case, it's a Yom. It's a day of remembrance, day of the shofar sound. It's a holy convocation, holy invocation, recalling the Exodus from Egypt. That's a standard way that we say our Kiddush, because that's why we're here. We're here because God took us out of Egypt. So we remind ourselves, remind God at every single holiday, at every single Shabbat. That's why we're here, because of Egypt. Why don't we just skip to Yom Din? I think we've talked about True a little bit. Let's go to 85. So we have a day of remembrance, a day of quaking. So Trua is another way. It's a day of the sound of the shofar, but it's also another way of saying quaking. There's like a fear when you think about Trua. The Trua is the sound that goes, you're shaking. It's a shaking sound. And then we have Yom Din, the day of judgment. We saw that a little bit in the Mishna. So this is a prayer a little bit further along in time. It's called a piyut. It was a land of Israel, 5th, 6th century. And it's calling this day the day of judgment. So this is a prayer that our dearest Rob will be chanting in the morning. Also in the morning prayer of the Amidah. And it's, just, you can just read through a couple sentences in English, and so let I'll crown you the ultimate arbiter of justice, who probes all hearts in the day of judgment, reveals what is hidden with justice, the voice of truth in the day of judgment. I mean, it's talking about the day of judgment, the day of judgment, the day of judgment. Here's justice, justice, day of judgment, justice, 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 day of judgment. It literally, if you look in the Hebrew, it hammers it home to the point of obnoxiousness, the way it has B'yom Din and Badin. If it's those, if you don't read Hebrew, it's these two words and the one word at the end. B'yom Din Badin, B'yom Din Badin. Justice, day of judgment, justice, day of judgment, justice. So this is literally hitting the hammer over and over again on your head, or if your head were a nail, saying, why are you here today? To be judged, to be judged, to be judged, to be judged, to be judged. So a day of remembrance, a day of quaking, a day of judgment. And I'll leave you on one that's kind of, not leave you, but this one's a little bit nicer. So go to 158. It's not all terrible. Rosh Hashanah. There are some positives as well to these the nicknames. So this is our 4th name for Rosh Hashanah. So yeah, Yom Zikaron, Yom Trua, Yom Din. This is Yom Harat HaOlam. So after the shofar is blasted, every single time we go Hayom Hayom Harat Olam Hayom Yom Din B'Mishpat blah blah blah. Right, we're going to sing that a couple of times, which means today the world stands as at birth. Today all creation is called to, but then it talks about judgment. Today all creation is called to judgment, whether as your children or as servants. And then you're asking for God's compassion. If as your children, be compassionate with us, as a parent is compassionate with children, is that their servants, we look to you expectantly, waiting for you to be gracious to us, and as day emerges from night, to bring forth a favorable judgment on our behalf, awe-inspiring and holy one. So you're saying that this is kind of where the birthday of the world comes in. So this is where a lot of people say it's the new year, it's the world's birthday. It's a day that we're judging, and we're asking God to treat us as if we're kind of coming out of the womb and to give us a fresh start. I think I'll say a couple.
Rabbi,
Yes.
sorry, I had a comment about the judgment, because at the end of each of those judgment sentences, it says with justice.
Yes, Badin.
That's it's important.
It is important. What's important?
Judging us, but with justice. Yeah,
Absolutely.
not just
No, that's important. Yeah,
beating us on the head, but saying with justice. Yeah,
absolutely.
with compassion, with justice. Yeah.
I'm trying to share with you the thing I'm actually trying to share with you. Here we go. No, that's wrong. Ugh, why is it doing this? I can't find. I'm trying to share with you anymore. Pardon me, people in this room, as I'm trying to find. This isn't right. I can't find it anymore on my computer for some reason, but because I put it somewhere weird, but I will stop screen sharing for a second and talk a little bit more about Yom Harat Olam, and then, it's 4:04. I'm happy to go for a couple more minutes. People are also welcome to do what they need to do, but I just want to give you time check. So I just wanted to talk for a few minutes more about the Yom Harat Olam, and then just hear what you have to say. And we could always close there, and you could take home and read more about where it talks about apples and honey. But I'm happy to go up till 4:30 if people are interested, but I will never be offended if you need to leave. And just leave me. So Yom Harat Olam. So the rabbis think that this birthday of the world, the day that the world is born, a couple of things happen. So first of all, Rosh Hashanah would be the day of creation when human beings were created. So that's important to know. That's the first thing that happened, not the birth of the world. It's the day when human beings were created. It's the day when Noah sent out a dove when the world was flooded. The dove went out, the dove did not come back. They believe that happened on Rosh Hashanah. It's the day that Abraham and Sarah's prayers were answered and Sarah was able to conceive her son Isaac. It's when Rachel's prayers were answered because her sister Leah had so many children, and Rachel finally, her prayers were answered and she conceived her son Joseph on Rosh Hashanah. These are all according to what we call midrashim, these allegories, these stories of the rabbis. It's when Joseph was wrongly imprisoned by the wife of Potiphar, who asked him to have extramarital relationships with her, and he said, "No way, Jose, I'm not doing that." And he was put in jail, essentially, because she falsely accused him of rape. And he was released after 10 years from prison on Rosh Hashanah. And we also have another conception, a miracle conception. So on Rosh Hashanah, we also read the special haftarah of the story of this woman, Hannah, who also did not have any children, and her sister wife, really is the best word for it. Her husband's other wife, Penina, had lots of children. She had no children, and she also conceived her son on Rosh Hashanah. So there's this property of birth happening, of birth of humanity, rebirth of humanity with no literal conception of these miracle children, as well as being released from prison happening on this day, this Yom Harat Olam, this creation of the world. So that's this other name, and the rabbis use that as proof to say this is another mystical property that this day has. So those are and that's aside from where we Rosh Hashanah. You can always read the text of Unatana Tokef on your own time when we get there, asking for, that's the who will live and who will die, but that's when they actually do refer to the holiday as Rosh Hashanah itself. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. So that's a lot of names, a lot of thoughts. So where does that leave you? What is your connection? Do you have a connection to any of these names when you're thinking about the holiday? When you're thinking about this holiday we're about to approach, this day of shaking, this day of judgment, this day of new birth, of rebirth, this day of remembrance of what? Were any of those names shocking to you, or any of those names inspirational to you as you're thinking, as you're approaching this holiday? I'm just curious to hear, just opening up, I'm curious to hear any thoughts.
I find Yom Harot Olam appealing because it's rebirth, it's renewal, and that's basically what I kind of do while we're sitting here for hours and hours and hours, is I kind of think about all those things and how the trajectory we're going, trajectory I'm going on my own.
Right. I saw Anita's hand too.
Well, this is the first time I heard that these women conceived on Rosh Hashanah.
Mhm.
So we can hope that on Rosh Hashanah, something special might happen.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
It's a nice counterpoint to trembling and judgment, which I've always associated with all of both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And yeah, this is very inspiring. The births.
Anyone for the judgment?
No,
No, it's a
No.
downer.
yeah, it's a downer. And besides, we do it if we're
No.
Jews, we do it
No,
to
no, no.
ourselves all the time.
I
Self-judgment.
think it's like when I think Yom Kippur, I think about reflection and judgment. So that's one of the years over.
Exactly. So, and I think that is the wonderful PR battle that Rosh Hashanah has won against Yom Kippur wrongly is that Rosh Hashanah because of the food, because of the apples and honey. So just for, I'm going to talk through what all the rest of these sources are, but just because there's a lot there, but I want to just quickly encapsulate what they are, just throw them into the conversation. So Rosh Hashanah clearly has a great PR team. They have an excellent PR team. Where people think Rosh Hashanah, you think apples and honey, hooray, beautiful, wonderful. Yom Kippur is a day of judgment and sad. And I think it's a lot to do with the fact that we're eating food. I think it's a lot to do with the fact that we're eating food. And so the rabbis liked to write down what they would eat in the Gemara for us all to know what they ate in perpetuity. I mean, so there was this dude named Abaye, and whenever the high holidays would come around, he would eat squash and beans and leeks and beets and dates on Rosh Hashanah. And he gave us all these reasons, and other people like to eat apples, and they like to eat apples because they're a sign of the apple tree, which is a sign which is a sign of hope. And so there were these people and then the law codes said, oh, that's so great that these people like to eat these foods. Let's write it into law. And so let's say, so the Shofar, which is really 1500s, I mean, it says foods that we customarily eat on Rosh Hashanah. And there's the beets and leeks and dates and squash and lamb. And what you might refer to now is what we call this Rosh Hashanah Seder, where in some houses people will take the apples, dip it in honey and say it's for a sweet new year. And they take dates and they go, it's for prosperity. And they eat, and all of them are basically about killing your enemies. I mean, literally eating carrots is about killing your enemies, eating leeks is about killing your enemies, all of them. And they have this symbolic food. But one of those symbolic foods is this, it's sweet. There's sweetness. It's dates, it's apples and honeys. And the reasons they're eating it is to try to, in some ways, trick God. So the last source is from the Mishna, which is a very modern source that was written last century, that all these practices are done as a good sign. Therefore, it's obvious that we should not get angry during these 8 days in order that it should be for a good sign. We should be happy and trust in God with our repentance and good deeds. So we psychologically psych ourselves up with these foods, with the apples and honey, with the sweetness, in order to have what we call like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that if we think good thoughts, then it will all be good, right? So in some ways, that was an excellent PR written by the rabbis of the Gemara that's been brought through to this day about the foods and these symbols of renewal and these sweetness, so that we eat them and we bring them into our meals and we simis. Now, that's and the reason we eat simis
I'm
is
telling you, he has to eat beets and squash. He's not getting simmons.
that's right. But the reason we eat simis is because it's squash and carrots and honey, all of these symbolic sweet foods that we would have eaten in the Seder that they threw together into a modge-podge.
Rosh Hashanah is not unique. I mean, celebrating the new year is cross-cultural, whether it's Western culture, every culture, for the most part, has this New Year celebration, a way of kind of having a positive outlook on,
Right.
You've had a bad year, looking forward to a good new year.
Right. So it's a bad New Year way looking for a good New Year with these foods. But I think the food is a great way to also, I don't want to say trick ourselves, but for lack of a better word, trick ourselves into putting only good thoughts into the day to distract you from the other parts, such as judgment and shaking and the fear that might be on such a day where the liturgy says that we are like sheep. We are like sheep being brought one at a time, and God has a staff and goes, okay, sheep number 1, I'm examining you. Next, sheep number 2, I'm examining you. And that's what our prayers say. It's not to, and I don't think it's to frighten us. I don't think it's to make people, God forbid, fear. When I was in the Orthodox world, and this is not anti-Orthodox, it's just something I personally experienced and did not like, was a lot of fear of life, I think, was put into the high holidays because there's this thing called the Book of Life. But I don't think the Book of Life and people this year, we know good people around this table who have passed. There's no way in this world, I think any of those people were being punished for any of their anything. They passed, they were sick, there's reasons that people pass. And I personally can't go there, although I know that there's a difference of opinions around that. And so there's no shame in your personal belief, but all that's to say that even though that might be a day of judgment or a day of shaking or a day of quaking, I think there's health in that as well. It's good to look inside and to take a good look inside and to see, am I living the life that I want to live, right? If I were to be the one to look at myself from the outside as if I were the sheep being passed before with the staff, and would I be happy with this sheep? Would I be happy with these deeds? These deeds are not. But and so certainly the symbolic food, certainly the liturgy also inspires us to think of it as a time of rebirth, of a time of hoping that this year will be sweeter, that we should be like the head of the lamb or the head of the fish and not the tail, which is one of the symbolic foods, right? That our enemies should be destroyed, and those sometimes are internal. They don't always have to be external enemies, although with COVID they certainly are. But sometimes we have our own self-doubts, our own internal enemies that we'd like to get rid of for next year as well.
The other thing is that this year in particular, you got to think about that you survived the last year.
Mhm.
Yes, there's a lot of people that haven't, either because of COVID or because of other illnesses. If you survive it,
I'm going to say it. Yeah. Oh, Michelle was saying to remember that we've also survived this year, all of us, literally. Not only did we survive the year, but we survived the year. We're in a global pandemic, and it's not to be taken lightly, no matter what age or stage we're in, because people, from all ages and stages and varying degrees of health have been taken by this virus. Right. So,
But just to follow up on what Michelle said, so far, I don't see much of the word gratitude. And I agree that, is judgment and fear and okay, all of that. But gratitude, is that going to be in our liturgy?
it absolutely will be
Good.
about 10 days later
Okay.
when we get to Yom Kippur.
I
Right.
can wait.
No, Yom Kippur. And so that was why I started with what I'm ending with now. And I will end now, but you're welcome to just have any additional questions at the end. But it's a complicated day. I think it has a great PR team, excellent PR team. But I encourage you to really read through the liturgy and to see what the liturgy is saying. And there's a lot of pausing, a lot of recognizing that the divine is in charge, that I'm not in charge. There's a whole section of the Amidah called Malchut Yot, kingship, where you're literally like, God, I got nothing. That's in the Musaf Amidah. We literally say, God, I got nothing. You are in charge and I've got nothing. And if you make it that far in Musaf, you can read that in the Hebrew or English. It's a day of asking God to remember, or perhaps us remembering God. It's a day of quaking. It's a day of judgment. It's a day where these miracle rebirths or new starts did happen. However, the gratitude, we're not going to really see the liturgy turning around and saying, thanks, God, until we get to Yom Kippur. Because we're not there yet. We still have to go through the journey. This is the initial, I know fight was a bad metaphor, but I was trying to break it down to simple terms where, this is that initial bringing up the issues that we have in marital counseling, perhaps more so God than us, or maybe we're just listening, or maybe we're saying, God, you don't actually remember when I do all these nice things. That could be Michelle's point, right? I do these nice things for you, and you only think of the bad things I do. We're hashing it out now, and the reconciliation is on Yom Kippur. So that, we'll get there. But not yet. We're not, but we at least get to eat. Well, Pastor Koch, I think, do I have?
That's right.
1, 2, 3, I have one, two, I have everyone on Zoom written down. Well, wonderful. Well,
Thank you. This was great.
well, thank you
It
all.
was
Thank
interesting.
you.
Yeah,
officially-
interesting.
I'm going to officially stop the recording of Zoom, but anyone who has any extra questions, I'm happy to stick around and talk about them. You can take this home with you.
I'm showing him it's not.